Brittney Griner is still being held in Russia for empty marijuana vape capsules. What do you make of the significance of Russia holding on to her and her pleading guilty?
Okay, so I'm putting this in the context of the fact that we know Russia tried to hack our election. We know for a fact that Russia was running the largest Black Lives Matter Facebook group. It turns out that was just, a sock puppet factory in Russia. Mm-hmm. Okay. We know that Putin wants to fuck with Biden. We know that Putin was afraid of Biden running. Okay. Also, Trump was and winning. And we know that the number one way.
But then that doesn't explain why Putin has decided to invade Ukraine with Biden as president rather than Trump.
Oh, I think it does explain it because he's hoping that Biden will only have a 4-year term. And he's hoping this Brittney Griner shit will embarrass Biden to the point where there's no political will to get any more involved. And
he'll lose the black vote. That affects how female voters look at him. I mean, it's a smart move, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, whether or not is this a setup?
At another time.
Yeah, but I mean, Brittney Griner admitted to carrying the capsules, right? So it's not like they planted it on her and then used her as kind of a negotiating technique, or do you think they are, or do you think they did? Do you think they're using it, or did she break the law?
She said she had no intention, but she might have accidentally had these capsules. And here's the thing: like Brittney Griner does go play in Russia every year because the WNBA doesn't pay her enough, and that's a whole separate episode that we will.
That's a whole nother, because I've heard that argument. If she were LeBron James, she'd be home. I was like, well, she's not though, right? Number one. Number two, they make 40 million. She makes 220, but the male basketball league brings in a lot more revenue than the women's league does. Hence the difference in pay. But
right.
That's another conversation.
That's a whole nother conversation. But even if it was LeBron James, I think they'd be holding him as long as they could in order to embarrass Biden, because this, as you put it so well and so accurately, this
literally targets his
base
with his voters. Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
and he's not really spoken on it. I mean, he? I know his press secretary has. I know he says, I read her letter, Brittney Griner. Like, okay, I don't need an update from the president that he read a letter. Are you bringing her ass home or what?
What's the thing? It's negotiations.
Right, because Russia wants somebody in exchange, right?
Yeah, they want a guy who is literally called the Merchant of Death. He's a fucking arms dealer. Who's a real criminal.
Oh, okay.
Good job. And here's the thing. They have done this before with other Americans in Russia. There's another person who's been there for like more than 2 years who just got back. And another person who's still over there that they tried to exchange for this fucking guy. Nobody knows or cares about that person because they're not a fucking celebrity. So I do kind of bristle at the idea that all these celebrities, particularly Black celebrities, like bring Brittney Griner home now, when like y'all didn't give a fuck about any of these other people that the Russians have done this with. Okay, this is not the first time. You only care because it's a celebrity.
Right. And she's a female and she's a lesbian. I mean, and they're dragging her around like King Kong. I mean, it's awful. I think the two other Americans that you're talking about that were detained, former Marine Paul Whelan and other former Marine Trevor Reed. Whelan was arrested in 2018 and sentenced to 16 years in prison for espionage. He had pleaded not guilty. Reed was convicted in 2020 for intentionally endangering the lives of police, and he was sentenced to 9 years in jail. Reed has said he was drunk of the night of the event and didn't remember it. He lost his appeal in 2021, and his sentence was upheld.
So he ain't coming home.
No.
Yeah. I see. Here's the thing. People are like, when's she coming home? As if that's going to happen anytime soon. Bruh, I think they're going to keep her until the 2024 election just to embarrass Biden.
I think they're going to keep her too. It'd be the smart play because that will directly impact the base the Democrats need to win. And the Democrats are already wounded in spite of how disgusting the Republican Party is right now. It's shameful. It's shameful that the Democrats are losing to the likes of this. It's shameful. There's no explanation for it other than one of two things: sheer stupidity or complicity. You decide.
And just lack of backbone. So that's a mixture of stupidity and complicity. But they should have mopped the floor.
They should have been mopping the floors with the Republicans. They're in control of both houses and the presidency. What's the problem?
Well, Joe Manchin is the problem. Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema most of the time. But when it comes to like the codification of Roe v. Wade, Joe Manchin is the one fucking person because he's from West Virginia and that's Trump country.
When did people become more allegiant to the president over the country? I've never seen such loyalty to a president in my lifetime.
Well, he's afraid of not getting reelected. So, even though he's a Democrat.
Well, he's not going to get reelected. And the Republicans are weeding him out because the powers that be have already decided it's not going to be him. You can already see that the wind has changed direction. And I'm going to make a prediction that I think who it's going to come down to is Gavin Newsom and DeSantis.
Okay, you're talking about the presidential election.
Yes, the next president. Yeah, no, I'm saying this hype around Trump running, I don't think he's going to run. I think he wants to run, but doesn't have the support of the party.
Oh yeah, it'll be.
And the reason I say that is because even Fox News is like, this nigga did the what? Yeah. So I'm thinking all this hype, the buildup is really going to be between DeSantis and Newsom. Hence why Newsom is picking that Twitter war with DeSantis. Just, he's fluffing the situation.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. And it's a good lineup. It's a good match.
Yeah. Joe Manchin being in West Virginia being Trump country, he thinks he can get reelected if he throws Biden's agenda under the bus, despite the fact that there's a D next to his name. My thing is like, bro, you probably aren't getting reelected, regardless of how much of a maverick you try to act like you are, or regardless of how much you buck, Biden's agenda and shit. Right. So he's the one pro-life Democrat in the Senate right now, and he's blocking everything. Mm-hmm. And Joe Biden won't call him out because they're worried about him switching parties. But my thing is, if he switches parties, then that actually kind of alleviates the Democrats from being on the hook for all the criticism of
and beholden to him.
And you haven't done anything.
Agreed. And they're not so beholden to him if he's just not on their team.
Yeah, because right now Joe Manchin is the most powerful person in Washington. Because
all because he's holding out the most.
In line.
Yeah, and because he's holding out the most on the date, right? Everybody else has given it up already, and he's still, holding his skirt around his knees. Nonetheless, whatever. I think all of this is a distraction from the buildup. I think it's going to come down to ultimately Biden's out of the picture. The guy looks like he's on life support. I mean, I'm sorry. He looks like a ghost. So he's too old. He doesn't have the energy for this. Kamala's numbers is in the toilet. She didn't win women. She didn't overwhelmingly win any group. So other than Black women, and Black women can't carry a national election on their own. They just can't. So
just not enough of us.
It's not enough of us. Percentage wise, there's just not enough of us. And of that percentage, not enough of us vote. It's going to come down to Newsom and DeSantis. Newsom's very photogenic. DeSantis is a lawyer. It's a good match.
The thing
for
is,
this political theater that we're watching. These are two good nemesis.
There's a bunch of dirt about Gavin Newsom that I've heard out here.
Oh my God, he's like Clinton-esque.
Yeah, I've heard
a lot. Yeah.
So,
but DeSantis, but DeSantis is like trying to bring in the Handmaid's Tale. So, it's like, who do you pick, Satan or Lucifer? I don't know.
Right. So let's get into that at another time, because it'd be very.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. We'll see if my prediction is correct.
Yeah, I think Pete Buttigieg could be a dark horse. I also think Elizabeth Warren could run and pop some shit off as well. I mean, unless Biden starts taking like really, really dynamic action and basically becomes a completely different version of himself.
Well, he needs his clone. So if they wheel out his clone and put him to bed, then maybe. But I don't think so. I think his numbers are in the toilet. The inflation rate, he's going to get blamed for that. He's getting blamed for high gas prices, even though that's not his fault. That's OPEC. I mean, that doesn't explain why gas prices has gone up all over the planet. Biden doesn't control that, but obviously
gas is high in Canada. My nigga, like
right. The Ukraine war, it continues. Companies are suddenly doing layoffs after extreme hiring, and the inflation. There's inflation, even though there's actually no true factors contributing to why inflation is occurring at this time. It's just greed. Like companies are making money. Companies are making money.
That's interesting. There is definitely price gouging going on at the pump because the price of a barrel has gone down, but the price of gas is, I mean, it's lately come down a little bit, but it should be tracking the price of a barrel of oil. Barrel of oil is way down here. You know, it's nowhere near correlated right now. It's there's definitely some price gouging going on. Unless the guy like literally like, hey, we're gonna forgive all the student loans and we're gonna, you know, expand the court, and like unless the guy unless he turns into Bernie Sanders, you're right, he's not gonna have this.
No, and he's not even going to win over. They're too old. They're not. We live in a digital age, just like how I'm blanking. Was it FDR who was the president that was in the wheelchair?
Yes.
The reason he was elected is because TV didn't exist then. He was a radio president. Were he of the digital television age, he may not have won because he was in a wheelchair.
Mm.
Similarly, in this digital age that we're in, Trump is aging like a banana and Biden looks like he's on life support. Both parties need fresh blood. A woman, I don't think, is going to take it on the heels of Trump, not with all this just male energy floating around on the heels of his presidency. So I don't think a woman is going to get elected on the heels of Trump. So it's going to come down to two males. It will come down to two white males. And I do believe it's going to come down. The powers that be have decided it's going to be Newsom and DeSantis.
They've already decided.
It's decided already, I think.
Well, remember back in 2016, they kind of decided that it was going to be Hillary versus Jeb Bush. And then people kind of bristled at Jeb Bush kind of being selected already for them.
Yeah, but he crashed and burned, and the DNC burned Bernie Sanders on that. So that wasn't just the powers that be. The DNC was behind that.
Okay, I'll push back on that at another time. Let's move on.
Oh, okay. Bernie
Bernie lost by millions of votes in both primaries, but anyway.